of Muncie, Indiana. As a result of these prosecutions, 4 corrupt city officials, a corrupt police officer, and 3 corrupt civilians who engaged in a number of pay-to-play schemes have been held accountable and convicted of federal felony offenses. These defendants deprived the citizens and the taxpayers of much-needed public funds and the honest services of their own government. These violations of the public trust are a special category of wrong, because if the powerful in the government can't be held accountable, the public lose faith in the government itself. And so schemes like those here, dubbed the program by the participants, erode confidence that government officials are actually serving the public. For too many years, the program was how business was done in Muncie, Indiana. Bid rigging, political bosses greenlighting contractors who inflated costs and billed the public for work that was never even done. And when a mayor and other city leaders are involved in this sort of corruption, in a city where many residents still know their government officials by their first names, these violations of the trust of the public cut even deeper. And in a city facing significant public needs, over $3 million in corrupt schemes have a real impact on the government's ability to serve the public. This was wrong, it was a crime, and the criminals involved have been held accountable. Of these 8 convicted felon defendants, 6 of them now have been sent to federal prison, and the court has entered a number of restitution orders in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And these sentences alone aren't going to repair the broken trust of the public, but they're an important start. And to all of those who might seek to criminally abuse the public's trust from the public offices they now hold or from influencing public officials unlawfully, I'll tell you this. The U.S. Attorney's Office, the Department of Justice, and the FBI, we are watching, we will investigate, we will prosecute, and we will do all we can to ensure that you are held accountable in federal court on behalf of the public that we serve. And so I want to thank Assistant U.S. Attorney Preston. I want to thank her investigative team at the FBI, as well as the professionals in my office, for working together on these important and complex prosecutions. And now I'll turn things over to Special Agent in Charge Stapleton.
Thank you, Mr. Myers, and thank all of you for being here today. On behalf of the FBI, I want to express my gratitude for the work of the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of West Virginia. I'm sorry, I used to work in West Virginia. I want to express my gratitude for the work of the United States Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Indiana. Thank you for partnering with the FBI to see that justice was done in this very important investigation. The FBI's involvement in this case began in 2015 with a tip that eventually led to a years-long investigation and the indictment of several people which U.S. Attorney Myers just discussed, including the mayor of Muncie, Indiana, and the individual who is sentenced today culminating this years-long investigation, Mr. Tony Franklin. Public officials in the state of Indiana should be executing their duties to benefit the citizens that they serve, not to line their own pockets. It's bad enough when a single public official uses public funds for their own benefit, but this corruption involved multiple officials and private citizens and undermined trust in the city's stewardship of taxpayer dollars, as well as the competitive bidding process. As a result of this systemic public corruption involving contracts and kickbacks, taxpayers were deprived of more than $1 million of value that should have accrued to the benefit of the public. Left unchecked, the misconduct of these few individuals could unfairly tarnish the reputations of the many, many public servants throughout the state of Indiana who work hard to make life better for the citizens they represent. This case should send a message that public officials who engage in criminal activity like this, thinking that they are above the law, will be identified and held accountable. Investigations like this one are never easy. Because of the political power and influence wielded by these potential defendants, it can be difficult to obtain evidence of the crimes and to find witnesses with the courage to testify to the truth. The FBI is extremely grateful to those members of the public who are willing to stand up for what's right and provide information that brought these abuses of power to light. Without information from the public, this case might never have gotten off the ground. This investigation also highlights the tenacity, hard work, and dedication of our agents, analysts, and support staff who persistently pursued the facts and followed the money to find the truth. I'm proud of the job they did. I'm proud of the job they have done to bring these defendants to justice. The hardworking, tax-paying residents of Muncie, Indiana deserved better than this, and hopefully the dedicated work of the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI will restore some trust, public trust in this particular institution. Cases like this one are the reason public corruption is a top criminal investigative priority of the FBI. And we encourage the public to bring these types of abuses of public office to light and report them to the FBI. Thank you.
And with that, I am happy to take any questions. Oh, sorry, I saw you first, I believe.
Oh, yes, sorry about that. I saw here, like, for example, Dennis Tyler, Craig Nichols were asked to pay significant sums of restitution. Their cases have been resolved for some time now. Do you know if any of that restitution has been paid to this point?
I would have to check with the court's clerk's office to see how much progress they've made towards satisfying the ordered restitution.
And then, can you just explain the difference between the Muncie police investigation and this investigation? Are these completely separate, and can you just talk about that?
So what you're referring to as the Muncie police investigation is a prosecution that's currently pending against two remaining defendants. That's a civil rights investigation of allegations of excessive force, and that is a separate investigation from this public corruption investigation.
You mentioned that your investigators caught wind of the contracting scheme in 2015. How long had it been going on when your office became aware of this?
2014 is, according to the court documents, I believe, how far back the corruption began.
And just so we're clear with the sentencing, are like with the mayor and a couple of the other individuals that are currently serving these terms, these prison terms now, are they going to report to prison? Or?
So because these were a number of separate indictments that were all related as part of the investigation, these individuals have all been sentenced over a period of time. Some of them were sentenced, I believe, in 2019, some in 2020, some, as early as the final defendant was today, because these prosecutions have gone on for a while and everyone resolved at a different time. So some of the individuals who were ordered to prison, I believe, have already served their terms. I would have to check on the Bureau of Prisons website to see if they've been designated and if they've returned to the community.
And just, sorry, I'm throwing three at you here, but is this, with the sentencing, is that like the maximum, I don't know if that's the term you use, or is that just, did they get these sentences because they cooperated? I guess, they break down how.
So in federal court, there are advisory guidelines that the court takes into account for each individual defendant based on the nature and circumstances of their offense, based on their history, and based on their specific role and anything they did after being charged. And so the court takes that into account and comes up with a different sentence for each one, even though there's an advisory guideline range, and the government and the defense both will argue for what they believe is an appropriate sentence. At the end of the day, it's the decision of the court as to what sentence to impose, and the court imposed the sentences here, which we believe justly hold the defendants accountable.
Do you know what the cumulative amount of time to be served is between all the defendants?
Doing some quick addition, I believe 1, 3, 4, 6, I believe approximately 7.5 years across the 8 defendants.
Are you satisfied with that?
We believe that we believe that justice has been done, and while obviously the court doesn't always impose the sentences that we recommend, we believe that the sentences that the court has chosen to impose adequately address the need to hold these defendants accountable, especially because I think it's very important in public corruption cases that that the appropriate defendants are sent to prison. Federal prison is not, there's no parole in the federal system. There hasn't been since 1984. These defendants will serve approximately 85% of their prison sentences in the custody of the Bureau of Prisons. And I think that it's important to send the message that if you engage in these sorts of violations of trust, you aren't just going to be prosecuted, but it is very likely that you will be spending, your sentence inside a federal cell. Oh, sorry. I apologize. He'd asked first.
Throughout this investigation, a former Muncie City Council member named Phil Nichols has been described by various people as kind of the ringleader of the main conspiracy here. He died recently, obviously. His case did not reach completion. Is there any sense of disappointment or regret over the fact that that case didn't reach completion?
As you may be aware, Mr. Nichols was in fact charged with several of these defendants, and several of them in their guilty pleas specifically admitted that they conspired with the late Mr. Nichols in the offenses that they have been sentenced for. And in fact, Mr. Nichols had entered, and I believe we'd filed with the court a plea agreement in his case, although he remains innocent until finally convicted. And unfortunately, obviously, he passed away prior to the completion of his case, and so all those charges, as always happens when a defendant passes away, were dismissed. I think that, for the defendants who are here to be prosecuted, that we have done all we can to hold them appropriately accountable.
Does this conclude the whole investigation with the sanitary district and the corruption?
This resolves all of the charges that have been brought, and I think we never like to talk about, confirming or denying investigation or anything else, but I expect that for the charges that we have brought, I know that for the charges that have been brought, this resolves all of them.
Okay, gotcha. And then I was not in Indianapolis when this all started. Can you guys speak to the Jess Neal part of this? What her factors are? I apologize.
No problem at all. So according to the guilty plea, Mr. Neal admitted to arranging for some of the other defendants to pay kickbacks for getting into the program in terms of being green-lighted as contractors. And one of the defendants also agreed to steer work, to steer work associated with some of the projects at the behest of Mr. Neal, who was convicted of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. And the press release also has details about the specifics for each of the defendants. Yes?
This just came to me. Are these, and maybe, I don't know if you'll know the answer to this, but when these individuals, the ones who are still alive, complete their sentences, are they eligible to run for any elected office again in the United States, whether it's local, state, or federal?
Well, I can't speak to local and federal or local and state requirements. I can tell you for federal office that the Constitution sets forth who can run for federal office, and I'm not aware of any limitations in terms of prior convictions. Yes, ma'am.
I have two questions. One, just to confirm, Tony Franklin was the one that was sentenced today?
That's correct.
Okay, and then my other question is, you talked about systemic corruption. Are you aware of any improvements that the city has made to make sure something like this doesn't happen again? Or is that something you talked to them about? I'm just curious if any changes have been made.
So I'll say that, and we talked about sort of the importance of the public bringing these things to light with us. Our role in this system is that we do everything we can to learn about corruption that's going on in government. And as law enforcement, we investigate and prosecute. And I think it's up to those who are involved in government, those who are overseeing government directly. Hopefully criminal prosecution is not the primary tool by which we monitor, the effectiveness of our government. And to the extent that people are changing their processes or regulations, we don't have a say in that. But I would hope that seeing what happens when you do choose to cross the line and break the law will encourage folks who are engaged in the government and trying to do the right thing to set up sort of processes and controls so that they don't end up, on our desks. Any other questions? And with that, thank you all very much. We appreciate your time.